Hello, welcome to Talk Truth. My name is Corey Huntsberger. I've got my father, Alan Huntsberger, in the studio with me. And Dad, we're going to start off with our foundational verse. The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord. For he laid its foundation on the seas and established it on the rivers. Psalm 24, 1 and 2. Powerful verse, especially for today's program, because God created everything, everyone in the world, including our food, the sun that gives us vitamin D. I mean, the list goes on. To what? Sustain us, to make us healthy. But man has got his little grubby hands, Bill Gates trying to make his petroleum jelly butter and force us to eat it. And it's causing terrible things that happen to our bodies. But Alan, that's why that verse is important, because that's where we want to start off from, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, even Jesus uses the vine and the branches. And if you remain in him, and you know, you produce much fruit, because without him you can't do anything. It's kind of interesting how the Lord even illustrates life itself by what you see in the natural of a tree producing fruit.
Yeah, imagine a seed, Alan, planted in the ground, turns into a tree that feeds you forever and ever and ever. It's amazing. Anyway, we're going to be talking to Tony Lyons. He's the director of MAHA Action, a national grassroots movement dedicated to reversing chronic disease and reforming public health. He's also the president of Skyhorse Publishing, Alan, known for amplifying courageous voices and groundbreaking ideas, publishing this book, which you absolutely love. Hopefully one day that's going to be a historic book that is used in court to bring Anthony Fauci down. But let's watch this little clip and then bring on Tony.
It's a new day in America. For too long, industry prioritized profit over public health. But change has come, quietly at first, and then all at once. MAHA isn't about politics. It's about people standing up and saying, enough. Right away, they took on toxic food dyes and loopholes that allow poisons into our food. They're cleaning up what we feed our kids, cracking down on toxic additives, and fixing dietary guidelines that made us sick. This is about what's real. Real choice, real food, real health. They're renegades, putting science over dogma, standing up, listening, telling the truth about food. This movement is already happening. Join us.
Tony Lyons is the director of MAHA Action. He's here with us today. Sir, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Corey and Alan, for having me on.
Tony, can you tell us a little bit about, we saw the clip there, MAHA Action. What is it? Why did you get involved? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so, we look at things like the fact that the U.S. spends 2 to 3 times more on public health than any other country in the world. And they have, we have worse health outcomes. So we've been looking to find ways to bring this country up to speed. And we're trying to back what Bobby Kennedy is doing in Washington, that we think what's happening is revolutionary, and that he and Donald Trump are trying to push back on decades of lies and corruption that have really just punished the American public, ruined public health, poisoned our children, and that nothing could really be more important than setting our country back in the right direction and making our children healthy once again, making all of us able to sort of live healthier, longer lives.
Yeah, I love that. Go ahead, Dad.
You know, one of the things that I've noticed is that people really find it difficult to believe that the foods that they've ate for years and years and years is poisoning them. And in fact, when they look at the food and you look at maybe what is like organic or something maybe even better kind of food, they end up making a decision on the price tag. So how are we going to help people understand that no, the food that you've been eating over and over and over again is slowly poisoning you? How do we help people understand that?
Yeah, that's a really tough question of how you convince people that there could be other people running these big companies who really don't care whether you live or die, don't care whether your children are sick, whether they get autism, diabetes, some other chronic disease, because it's hard to imagine that there would be people like that. But the stats really prove that there are. And these companies know what they're doing. They've been doing it for a long time. They've been prioritizing profits over people. So the question there is, how do we begin to fight back, and how do we convince the public that they've been lied to when those companies make billions and billions of dollars? So they're willing to spend that money to try to indoctrinate the American public, to tell them that when they're getting poisoned, it's actually just not happening. But if you look at the stats, you see that more than half of our children are obese or suffering from chronic disease. And you look around and you see these just incredibly unhealthy people, and it just doesn't have to be like that. And it's nobody's fault. So parents shouldn't blame themselves. They've been lied to by this just incredibly effective and well-funded process of brainwashing that's happened in this country. So we have to fight back, and we're working really hard to do that. And the fact that we're seeing such an incredible groundswell of negativity from mass media, from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, all of these places are attacking Secretary Kennedy. They're attacking MAHA. They're attacking all of these incredibly good changes that are happening. And they're telling the American public that things have been great, that things have been great all along, that there's nothing wrong, that there are no problems that need to be solved. But deep down, I think those lies won't hold. That people look around, they see their own children suffering, they're suffering themselves, and they recognize, and they're really beginning to see that change is possible, that they can lead healthier, happier lives, and that that's not from the pharmaceutical company advertisement kind of picture of what the world is like, that they're sad people and then they show a drug, you take the drug and suddenly you're happy. We all know that that isn't true. We all know that we've been lied to. And deep down, we know that it's not our fault, and that this is an opportunity, that this is the first chance in the last couple of decades for us really to see the truth and then act on it and change our lives.
Yeah. Well, you got some incredible stats. And Alan, to answer your question, I don't think the butter grandma, 99-year-old grandma ate in her younger years is the same ingredients that are in the butter now. You know what I'm saying? They've made so many changes. And America is like the sickest nation. 74% of American adults are overweight and obese. I think on some of your stats, it said 77% of young adults do not qualify for the military due to their health scores. I mean, the list goes on. And how does this work? I think one of our biggest fears is we know Robert Kennedy's in, which is great. He's making changes, which is great. My fear is that when the administration changes, like we do every 4 years, 8 years, things change. We're going to go back to the junk. How does this whole system work?
Well, I think what's going to happen is that once people see the truth, it's hard to unsee it. So just hearing things like there are about 10,000 chemicals that are in our foods in this country that are not legal in other countries all around the world. And many of the products that contain those dangerous, toxic chemicals are not legal in the countries that produce them. So they produce them in parts of Europe or in China or in many other countries, and they ship them to the United States, but people in their own countries don't eat them, are not allowed to eat them. So that's kind of a crazy thing. It's crazy that can be possible and that most of the American public doesn't know it. But, one of the things that I've been really fascinated by is the degree to which we're being attacked now. So, that every major newspaper has attacked Trump, Kennedy, MAHA, all of the changes that are happening now. And, what that means, when I think about it, is that we're being so successful, that we're getting through to the public, and they're just going to spend whatever it takes to try to convince people that the things that they've been told aren't really happening. And I don't think that can possibly work, because I think people, like I said before, look around and they see their children are sick, they see that their friends are sick, and they look around the world and they see that a better life is possible. So we're putting together this. So we have this weekly group. It's called the MAHA Media Hub. And, on that Zoom call, we have 10 or 15 speakers each week that amount to something like 100 million followers on social media. And then we have 2,500 social media pundits and influencers watching that amount to something like 200 million more. So I think we're going to get this message out. And like I said, once people have heard it, it's hard to unhear. So I think that all of these hit pieces, all of this money thrown at trying to continue to lie to the public doesn't work when they see the facts, when they see the stats, when they listen to all of these intelligent people describing what's going on.
We've had Sean Buckley on our program, who is a constitutional lawyer that's done much in the area of health. And he basically said that Health Canada has nothing to do with our health. And it's like, what? That doesn't make sense. Your organization particularly promotes health freedom and public engagement. And MAHA emphasizes health freedom. How do you define that? And why is it so critical right now?
Well, it's so critical because one of the real tenets of all of these awful companies that have been poisoning our people is that they believe, or they say they believe, that one size fits all, that you can give the same things to the entire country and that's okay. But we all know that that isn't true, that in a world where people cared whether people were harmed from a product, you would look at each person separately. You would look at them and you would want to talk to their doctor. You would want to give them the opportunity to see whether there's a better way to deliver food or medicine to the public. So we think that medical freedom means being able to consult with your doctor and make a decision about what's best for you personally, that you know better, that your doctor knows better, knows your history, your story, your family. So that's a better system than taking things that are given to you by, for example, some big pharmaceutical company, because the company itself knows that that's not the way to deliver medicine. But they also know that it's the cheapest way, that it's the way that will make them the most profits. And we need to look at things in a different way. So you said before that people are often being asked to look at a product that's more expensive versus one that's cheap. So the answer there is that these cheap products and these drugs, these foods, these pesticides, all of these different things, they may seem cheap in the short run, but if you have chronic disease for the rest of your life, that's not going to be cheap. And it's not going to be fun. It's not going to lead you to have a good life, that lead an enjoyable life. So, Bobby Kennedy says that somebody who's chronically ill, has one dream, and that dream is to get healthy. And somebody who's healthy has 1,000 dreams. The world is right in front of them. They can make all kinds of choices. But if you're really ill, you don't have any choices left. So I think, that's what people ought to consider, is that, yes, maybe certain products will cost more in the short run, but that's going to be the best money that you ever spent.
Well, I'm glad you're getting a little bit of pushback from the media. All haters is good press, right? Any press is good press. I really do believe that. It keeps the engagement going, the conversation running. So I'm glad they're attacking you. I know personally it stinks, but I'm glad it's happening because it means you're hovering over the target. What are some of the wins that are happening now that you can tell us about that Robert's had?
Yeah, so there wins all across the spectrum. Bobby Kennedy had promised to do four things. I have this right in front of me when he was running with, on the vaccine front. So he said that he would end the COVID vaccine mandate, and he's done that. He said that he would keep vaccines available for anybody who wants them, so that he wouldn't ban anything, not pesticides, not vaccines, but that he thinks we can do better. Then he said he would give us placebo-controlled trials for all vaccines going forward. He's doing that now. So, when you look at those kinds of things, to many people, they don't seem critical, but to a lot of people who have suffered, who've been injured, this is what they've been really hoping for. And on the food front, you have chemicals, food dyes that have been taken out of foods nationally, that were clearly toxic, where their study after study says that they can lead to things like ADHD. Those have been taken out of foods. Parents ought to be thrilled with that. It's very hard to even get those stories, though, because mainstream media really tries to make sure that they stay hidden. So, those are some areas. And then in things like CMS, Medicare and Medicaid, they're taking away the ability for people to spend food stamps, to spend government money, taxpayer money on candy and sodas. Because why should the American public subsidize poisoning the American public? We should be giving people, if we're going to give them free food or free drugs or free anything, we should give things that are healthy. And that just seems like common sense. Common sense, one, out of sort of a moral duty, but also out of the same kind of long-term view that if you spend money, if you spend Medicaid money on things that poison people, then you actually pay twice, because then you're also on the hook for paying to treat those people who've been poisoned. So somebody who gets a chronic disease then needs taxpayer dollars to be treated for the rest of their life if it can't be, if they can't be healed. So those are some of the things. And then you see state after state is passing stricter laws on the things that the toxins that these major corporations can put into the foods in those states. So it's the same kind of thing where you go all around Europe and you go into a McDonald's there, and they might have 5 different, things in their French fries or in their burgers. And then in the US, you have a whole host of chemicals in those same foods that are banned everywhere else. So if we set up a system where, like those foreign countries, state after state doesn't let those companies put toxins in the food that's sold in their state, then at some point what happens is those companies make the rational decision, because what they really care about is profits. So their rational decision is to say, we don't want to have to make different products for 12 different states. We want to have the same product in all states and maybe even in all countries. And that would then lead to a permanent change here, where food would be healthier, where drugs would be healthier, where pesticides would be healthier. So that could lead to change that really lasts and lasts for decades, because people know what the problems are. The companies are put in a position where they can make more profit by doing the right thing. So that is the kind of change that I want to see, change that can't just be undone quickly.
Food starts with agriculture. I grew up on a farm, so, the way we did farming way back when I was a kid, with the way they do farming today, are two different things. Today, it's all geared with, sprays and pesticides and fertilizers and all of that kind of thing. Are you working in that segment of food preparation as well?
Definitely. I mean, we want to have fewer and fewer pesticides. We want the worst ones to be, taken off the market. We would like mainly to not have any liability shields. So what you saw in 1986 with vaccines was that all of the major pharmaceutical companies descended onto Washington, got their lobbyists with them, got congressional hearings, and they made this statement, which would seem strange to anybody hearing it now. So what they said, and this is an actual quote, is they said vaccines are unavoidably unsafe. So they came right out and said people are going to be injured, people are going to die, people are going to have permanent neurological damage, but the alternative is worse. So they made the argument that their products weren't safe, but that if we wanted to keep having them make those products, they were going to have to get this liability shield. So then they used that liability shield to increase their profits. They were really profitable companies beforehand, but they were getting sued now and then by people whose children got permanently ill or died from their products. So they then took away that option from families. So families could have a child die or get autism or get some other form of brain damage or neurological damage, and they'd have no recourse other than to sue the US government, which is, an incredibly long process. There's more than a 10-year waiting period now. So now the same playbook is being used with pesticides. So they're going all around the country trying to get liability shields, and they're trying to get that tagged on to a federal bill to get a permanent liability shield from the dangers and the harms caused by pesticides. But we all know what's going to happen. It's going to be the same thing that happened with vaccines. In 1986, there were 7 viruses that people got vaccines for, and there were no people dying in the streets. There was no big problem to be solved other than that these companies wanted to make even more money. So we went from those 7 viruses to 73 vaccines that every child in the country gets. So if it was unavoidably unsafe when they were vaccinating for 7 viruses, how unsafe is it now? And the same thing would happen for pesticides. If you give this liability shield, then there's no incentive for these companies to try to make their products more healthy. So they will then have more pesticides, less safe pesticides. So all of these things are just fundamental to what the MAHA movement wants to see. We don't want radical action. We want things to get better. We want people to understand what's happening to them. We want them to be able to balance the benefits and the risks of each product that they put into their body and make decisions for themselves that make sense.
I wanted to ask you this. Trump just recently tweeted about that he wants an investigation into Operation Warp Speed. He comes from the side of things of where everything's brilliant and it was amazing and it's genius. And I guess Bobby has been, talking to him in his ear or something, because he mentioned Bobby in there. It's like, Bobby says it wasn't that great. So I want answers. I want to see the data. Are you excited about that tweet? Because I think we've been waiting for the longest time, people that are in this MAHA, movement of like, okay, I like Trump. I like what he's doing. I like Bobby. He's doing some great things. Seems like they're working together really well. But Trump is still in this illusion that the, vaccine saved all these lives and it was brilliant. And for him to tweet that out, and now it looks like we're going to be able to, he's going to be able to like really have people he trusts to tell him really the truth and show him the data. Were you pretty excited about that tweet?
Yeah, that I thought was just an incredible tweet. It was, possibly the best news that I've had in a very long time. Because when I looked at that, I thought about what Trump really meant when he extols the triumph that was warp speed. So what President Trump thought was that, he had to trust the scientists who gave him information. He's not a scientist. He's not a researcher. He's the president of the United States. And so all these people come to him and they say, we have an answer. We can solve this problem. And we need your help getting these vaccines, which are safe and effective, which all of us say, which everybody said at the time, all the people in his orbit were all telling him, this is a great product. This is going to save millions of people's lives. What we need help with is how to deliver those to hundreds of millions of people quickly. So that's what warp speed was. And Trump, I think, is rightly proud of warp speed, of the problem that he was given to solve, that he then did solve. But now he realizes that, like the rest of the public in this country, he's been lied to. And he was lied to by all of these senior people. And we all have been lied to. And it's not our fault, and it's not his fault. But now we have better information. And he's saying, if the things that you told me were true, really were true, then prove them now. Don't give us the information in 75 years. not in 25 years, not in 10 years, not next year, but give them to us. And he said it in that tweet, give them to us right now. We demand it right now. If you have it, if the things that you told me in private can stand up to public scrutiny, then give those to us right now. And I think that was just a brilliant thing for President Trump to do. And it shows that he really thought this through. He listened to a different set of people who are smart people, who are thoughtful people, who are scientists, many of whom are Nobel Prize winners. So it's not about trusting science, it's about which science. And if it's good science, it can stand up to scrutiny. And the science that we got was science that was propelled by censorship and propaganda and lies. And that isn't science. And science is never, ever settled. Science is always on the table to be questioned, to be ridiculed, to be disproven. That's what we need. And that's what's happening now. And I'm thrilled to see that.
Wow. Love it. Tony, thank you so much for being on the show. We're out of time. Where can people go to learn more about MAHA Action?
They should go to mahaaction.com.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. We'll have you back.
Thanks, Tony.
Well, that was fascinating conversation. I'm excited. I have a million other questions. I'm sure does it. And I'm, it's so hard, Dad, to be patient when they have destroyed our food, our water, our soil, our air. I mean, evil, just evil. They've done it for a long, long time. It's hard to be patient to turn this around.
They've done.
Right? That's why people go like, Lord, just return now. Just come get me. Return now. Because it's like, that's easier than actually going through the process and trying to push back and get this rectified.
Right.
What were you going to say? Sorry.
Oh, well, I'm just going to say that they've been doing it for decades. And so you can't expect to fix a problem in a half an hour.
I know, but I'm impatient. I don't like waiting. It's like Christmas morning. I want to open up the presents now. Okay. You want to help support our mission, keep this kind of conversation and truth on the air. We are viewer supported. We don't take government funds or special interest groups or lobbyists. It's only because of the generosity of those who watch the show that we can continue to bring this information out to the rest of the country. If you would like to support us, you can go to our website, gotalktruth.com, click on donate. If you'd like to do it through the mail, you can. You can make your gift payable to Heritage Christian Ministries Association and send it to 246 Stewart Green Southwest, Suite 3260, Calgary, Alberta, T3H 3C8. And if you like prayer, you can call our toll-free line, 1-800-915-0056 in Canada. All right, Dad, we're out of time. We'll see you guys later.
Love you.